Welcome back to One Winning Pod. The Ravens are victorious in New York, well, technically New Jersey, 24-9 against the Jets. Joe Flacco fell to the Ravens, and he was kind of generous, you know. He got sacked 3 times. He gave us a pick. It was a good game, you know, like not particularly flashy from the Ravens, but I thought they just held their own pretty well after kind of a slow start.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to give the Jets defense credit here in this game. They came out, granted, of course, the Ravens played the first few offensive series conservative, like we said it was possible we could expect from them, given the guys coming back from injury, Lamar not having any preseason action with receivers. So, you know, they looked competent to begin with and looked like it might be a slow, drawn-out defensive struggle. But unfortunately for the Jets defense, the offensive line of the Jets made it practically impossible for aging Joe Flacco to do anything. Not many running holes for Breece Hall, and Michael Carter was able to do a decent job. But yeah, you know, credit the Jets defense. Like I said, they played well enough that if their offense got something going, it might have been an interesting game. But the Ravens defense overmatched the Jets offense and really tipped the scales in favor of the Ravens.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think you know, as Ravens fans, I think the you know, the people who still kind of wish for Joe Flacco, you know, for good things for him, I think this was one of those games that just kind of reiterated, you know, that unfortunately, you know, Flacco is who he is. I think at this point, I think for me, at the end of the day, I mean, he's showing the same thing that he showed, you know, at the end of his Ravens tenure in Denver, in Philadelphia, and now in New York, of his, you know, third down, you know, conversion rate was abysmal. And it's unfortunate because he can still make so many throws. I think there were parts of the game where he was really ripping the ball downfield and being accurate and, you know, ripping off chunk plays. I think he ended up with over 300 yards passing. But the attempt numbers are huge. I think he, you know, attempted 58 passes or something like that. Which
Holy cow!
He was approaching his career high. They said,
right.
Saying on the broadcast.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's something that you certainly don't want to see. You know, I know, you know, the stats for the Ravens. Whenever he had that many attempts, that means that the Ravens were on the losing end. He should not be passing that much. He should be giving in the ball to the running backs more. But yeah, you know, at the end of that, like he's ripping the ball around, but you know, just could not convert third downs. The guy has taken too many bad sacks, which again, you know, you can part of on the offensive line, but still, you know, part of that is also on Flacco. But and then a few just, you know, plays from the Jets too. Like they got unlucky with a few. That fumble with Breece Hall, like that, it killed a drive that was looking great. I mean, Joe was really looking good on that drive. You know, completely killed that. There were, you know, a handful of other ones that were just kind of like outside their control, which, you know, was, you know, unfortunate, you know, from that perspective. But certainly, you know, for me, I think it just kind of reiterated that, like, if for anyone who might still be listening and thinking, like, having any second thoughts about moving on from Lamar, one, I don't know why you would want to have that. But two, I feel like this is reiterating, like, look, Joe's not the same quarterback anymore. It's okay. That's fine. You know, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Move on.
His heyday was a decade ago, okay? 2012 was a long time ago. And, yeah, it is what it is. I will say, guys, like, you know, Flacco was playing this game because Zach Wilson was hurt. And similarly, the Ravens had those 3, maybe even arguably 4 injuries lingering from last year. Stanley, Boyle, Dobbins, and Peters. And the latter 2, while they were practicing to try to show that they could play, even in warm-ups that morning, they decided not to let him go. I heard that Peters was going up and down the stairs like Rocky style.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, he didn't play. Dobbins didn't play. So of course my bold prediction failed. I guess I'll have to use it next week, just because I think when he finally does show up, he's going to show up big. But yeah. Kind of left the Ravens a little thin, right? We saw, and because of it, we saw Drake as the starting running back, and then Armour Davis actually played a little bit after a very quiet preseason with injury. So kind of interesting to see how that shook out.
Yeah, and we were talking about it before recording, how now with the way teams are doing preseason differently, with really rationing how many snaps you give the starters, and Obviously, with the Ravens this year, plenty of starters didn't even suit up for any preseason game at all. That in a lot of ways, this first week, this new added 17th week, whether you want to look at it as the last or the first of the season, is kind of turning into kind of an extended preseason. You have to wonder also if field conditions might have had to do something with keeping those guys out. It was a wet game, not crazy wet, it seemed, watching from the broadcast, but still, not 100% ideal conditions from a weather perspective. And it's clear coming away from this game that the Ravens didn't need those guys to go out and win this game. But you do wonder if this was a game against a marquee opponent, say Pittsburgh or Buffalo in week 1, would the Ravens have tried to get those guys to play? Did the expected game script play an impact on that? And these guys are ready to go, but you didn't necessarily need all the dogs on the field to get this one, so they let them rest up a little longer. Just a thought. I won't pretend to know what the Ravens training staff is thinking there, but I think the point remains that it's fortunate the Ravens did hold them out long term, regardless of what the reason was, because they weren't needed for this game.
Right. The other thing too, infamously, the stadium in East Rutherford is one of the few, I guess, with artificial turf, and has been notorious for season-ending injuries. And unfortunately, the Ravens did not leave that stadium unscathed. We'll talk about it more later, but there looks like I think there's a confirmed season ender for Juwan James, which is unfortunate. And then Kyle Fuller, it definitely did not look good, at least on the field. I think in the fourth quarter he kind of had his injury, but I don't think we have confirmation as of yet. We're recording Sunday night, which is a little bit earlier than usual. We actually usually record Monday or Tuesday night, but had to push it up due to schedules. But yeah, that might have had something to do with it as well.
I'd argue that the guys who were inactive of those 4 that we spoke of are likely or healthier now than they will be by the postseason, just from like the attrition that goes on with the body over the course of an NFL grueling season. But they're basically just saying, you know what, we don't need it right now. I'd bet you, at least for, honestly, I would say for everybody but Stanley, I feel pretty confident they would have played if it was a postseason game. I have no idea what's going on with Boyle. He looked decent plus in preseason. I was very surprised to see him inactive, and it made me very concerned that, like, this man may never be the same. I don't know.
Yeah, I brought it up when we were talking with Jason. I saw it kind of differently. Boyle did not look 100% healthy to me. And again, I'm not going to sit here and claim that I have any knowledge of physical therapy and athletic injuries, more beyond what I've gone through myself. I just know I was watching Boyle in the preseason and comparing it with some film that I'd previously seen, and he just did not look right to me. And I'm fully saying I could be completely off base. I'm just doing my best here to play amateur scout with zero credentials, but I'm rooting for Boyle. I am. I blew out my knee in a freak basketball accident back in early January. What was that? 2017 by now. And it's crazy. This is the first year where I've had zero pain in the knee. Like, and even like there's no like any stiffness in like trying to extend it or anything. Like these type of injuries, and like I said, what Boyle had was worse than what I did. They can really F with your body. Like you have to completely revamp the type of athlete you are at whatever level you happen to be. Clearly, I'm not trying to do it at Boyle's level, but yeah, as someone who's gone through that type of thing and having to figure out how to kind of readjust to the realities of a rehabilitated leg injury, I was looking at some of the stuff in preseason, watching Boyle do it. I'm just like, yeah, he's still trying to figure it out from what it looks like to me. He's, still trying to figure out how does he move, not just from, the new injury standpoint. He's playing at a lower weight. And it could just be, some weeks are going to be tougher than others. And, I don't know. That's a long tangent to say that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Boyle Leg injuries are a huge question mark, and I'm rooting for the guy. I am rooting for him to come back and be Nick Boyle, but yeah, the preseason definitely had me concerned with him, and week one didn't help.
Well, that's kind of a good segue. I think we should probably talk about, one thing that wasn't super great in this game, but again, I think it kind of comes back to a lot of the question marks here. So the running offense, right? The run game. For me, I think, especially early on in the game, I think the Ravens were really struggling with execution. I saw a few uncharacteristic just misses from Ricard and some of the blocks where he's asked to kind of move across the formation. Just wasn't able to get to his guy. Andrews, I thought, had one or two of those blocks that 2020, 2021, you would have expected those guys to make those, no problem. Just uncharacteristic. And, again, could have been the weather situation, maybe. Could it be because this is sort of the extended preseason? Maybe. But certainly not something that you like to see from the Ravens. But yeah, it's a little bit of a concern. But in the back of my mind, I guess I'm thinking it's still week one. This isn't a trend. It's just one data point. First game. I'm not sure how much we can glean from it. But you add that Boyle was inactive. It's certainly a question of whether this is something that they can get fixed. I'll say the only good thing that I'm looking forward to, at least, is that it kind of felt like 2021 again. To me, it was really surprising that Drake got the start. He's the newest running back on the team, and he's starting for this. I think I only saw Mike Davis on a handful of plays, and one of them he had that fumble, which is fortunately recovered by the Ravens. I think that was in the third quarter. But just very uncharacteristic and just a little bit of a surprise to me. So a lot of moving pieces. Definitely was a concern going into week one. I think after seeing the game in week one, it's almost more of a concern. But then again, yeah, we'll have to see who comes back, and I'll have to see what it looks like against Miami.
Only 63 rushing yards for the Ravens, which was a big disappointment. But honestly, like you're saying, they didn't get the push. Like a couple times, it looked like the tight ends were out of balance and not getting their blocks, not sealing. And I also was just kind of surprised by the execution. Maybe it was just the rain, but yeah, definitely got that extended preseason vibe. Like you're saying, a little bit more vanilla. The play calling. Only 213 yards passing for Lamar Jackson. So in total, we had less than 300 yards. We had less yards than Joe Flacco passed for. And then they had 83 additional yards running. So we were able to score 24 points off of all that. And they were empty calorie yards for them and only 9. So pretty interesting how that kind of played out. The offense was pretty efficient on the drives that it actually, I guess, took the distance. If it got yards, it usually ended up in a touchdown. I think actually the one time that they had the best field position it was the best field position they had all game from the interception. They were like, oh yeah, we'll just get a field goal here. So kind of interesting how that played out for the offense.
Well, the one thing I was going to say, mention that was, I guess, well, not really good with the run game, but I guess something that was probably a positive thing to take away was that Lamar Jackson really was not a threat rushing the ball much, if at all, this game. He primarily stood in the pocket for most of the time. I know this is something that we had kind of talked about in the preseason, and that people from the Ravens, I think, had also mentioned where this isn't the 2019 offense where Lamar is always playing out of the pistol or out of the shotgun. Granted, sometimes that did happen, but he played under center a lot more this game, and not only that, but just I think there was only maybe a few, I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 rush attempts, I think, at all this game that he had. There weren't that many design runs from Lamar. It was almost entirely the running backs at this point. And so, in terms of was the Ravens rushing attack, was this a problem? If this was a Lamar-centric running game where Lamar and the running backs are shut down all game, then I would be a little bit more concerned. But because Lamar really wasn't a factor at all, and that was kind of by design, I feel like I'm a little bit less worried, because that's something that we can add into the offense over time, especially as execution starts to get a little bit better. Lamar can start to take some more of those options.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up, because like you're saying, we always know that the Ravens can fall back on Lamar going out there and running for first downs and running all over the field if nothing else is working. But to look at this game and point out, hey, the Ravens are able to score 3 touchdowns and a field goal very comfortably with Lamar practically being a pocket passer, I think, you got to look at that takeaway as a plus from this game, even though it was against an opponent that we're expecting, could take the leap this year, but also we would be, completely unsurprised if they didn't. So I think, especially considering this was Lamar's first game back from the injury, first time we've seen him since going down in Cleveland last year, that was a real positive, and I that's something we were looking for, and it was really encouraging to see him take that first step in 2022 and basically do everything you'd want him to do from a passing perspective.
I like what I saw out of Lamar as far as being a pocket passer. I think that he's stood confidently in the pocket, found the time. He just looked like himself back there, and I think the key was that he created that time in the pocket to hit those deeper shots that resulted in the touchdowns. He scrambled to find Duvernay for the first touchdown connection. I guess that was the second touchdown connection. I can't remember if the first one there was a scramble. And then, of course, for Bateman with that 55-yard pass, he had to stay in the pocket a long time for that to develop, and then he just kind of launched it, and it was one of those things of beauty. I love whenever I see him launch it downfield and push it downfield because I have a lot of trust in his decision-making and his ability to deliver a ball that our player can catch and do something with. So I was really, I think that was a positive takeaway for me, was seeing them push the field. So there were definitely components to take away from this game that gave me a little bit of confidence, but they're going to have to be way better at executing, particularly in the run game, to win some of these higher level of competition games.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I kind of agree with you guys. I think overall, I thought Lamar had a pretty good game from a passing perspective. Obviously there's a little bit of rust on there. There were a few passes I'm sure that he'd kind of like to have back, and just a few off-target throws. But you're right, Alec. I mean, he was taking deep shots. Not until Bateman finally connected on that 55-yard pass. I think he had like two kind of like deep attempts that kind of just fell. One of them I think fell short, and the other one I think Bateman didn't seem to want to try and make like a diving grab in the end zone to try and get. Whether he could have made it or not, debatable. But, it certainly took a few attempts before they finally connected on that. But, again, I think it goes back to, just kind of good decision making. Overall, I think it was, good for Lamar to kind of take those shots, but to do it in a sort of a safe way. There's really only one decision, which was the interception at the end of the game. It's a little bit weird. I'm not sure why, Lamar needed to push the ball down the sideline like that. And that one was actually more of an underthrow, and it was just a kind of a poor decision, poor throw in that situation. Fortunately, it didn't really matter. I guess it led to 6 points, but at that point, the game was kind of already sealed, so it didn't really make much of a difference in the whole game script.
Yeah, I actually liked that play. I haven't rewatched the highlight of it yet. I thought I saw it get tipped before after it left his hand. I have to double check, but at that point the game's won. Again, like we said, Lamar didn't practice in preseason. Let's try something that you can use later on in the season. Get some in-game reps on it. I'm not too concerned about that, but I do think the discussion on the run game is worth a further dive. In a lot of ways, this game kind of felt like the opening of the 2020 season, that game against the Cleveland Browns. Once again, Lamar Jackson, 3 touchdown passes, the defense shuts out the opposing offense, and the 3-headed running attack doesn't really work, but the Ravens won, so we're gonna overlook that a little bit. It definitely does feel like kind of deja vu there, and hopefully in this case it'll be better because, like we said, Dobbins wasn't out there. Hopefully Gus Edwards will be back at some point. We'll see with that. I don't think we can confidently say what Gus is going to be this year without knowing what the trainers know. But yeah, I mean, I think we were really hoping that the run lanes that would look better than they did in preseason because you'd have the starters out there, and they really didn't. and this was against a defense that wasn't terribly good against the run last year. Yes, they've upgraded in some areas, and we talked about, and it's very possible this defense is going to be better than it was last year. But I was still expecting a little more. I was expecting Mike Davis to at least be able to crunch out 40 yards or so. Drake got some good carries in there, but mostly it was him creating those yards. There really weren't any holes for him to go through. It was him outrunning the defenders. So, yeah, I agree with you guys. If there's one thing that you come away concerned with in this game, I think that's the number one thing. It's just we're still not seeing the running holes in week one after we didn't see them in the preseason.
And I was a little disappointed to see no Cleveland in this game. I thought that there would certainly be at least something, maybe when the game was a little bit more out of hand, give him some reps. I thought it might be a rotation. I was kind of disappointed to see that. And this is getting into almost the worst timeline for me that I discussed with Ken when I was talking about the left guard concerns I had, is that we might end up in a situation where Powers plays good enough to keep the job, and we never really find out what Cleveland has in this critical developmental year for him, and he could be better. I mean, there's only so much you can tell from practice, in my opinion. And I don't know. Of course, now with the left side of the line in question, McCary came in, and I thought that he let up a lot of ground. He didn't. I have to watch it a little bit closer. Like I said, we're recording on Sunday night, and I'll be honest, I was watching the game more of a fan than as the analytical podcaster today. Just enjoying it with some friends and not, sitting with my computer, writing down notes. Actually conversing with my neighbor and stuff. So, but I did just notice he was kind of giving up ground, and I don't know. I'm if I were the Ravens training staff, I'd be like, all right, Stanley, you ready? It's go time, baby. A little bit of trial by fire for him, but we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing and how they progress. But definitely a little bit of concerns there. I think well stated, Peter, that it had major early 2021 vibes where we're winning games, sometimes even kind of dominantly, but not with any kind of offensive production that felt sustainable. We scored 24 points. We scored 3 touchdowns. There was a long pass in there, but it just didn't feel like there was a cadence or a rhyme or reason to any of it. It just kind of occurred. And that ain't good.
Yeah, definitely. Which again is something, I don't want to read too much into week one, just me personally, but also it's easy, it's not too hard to remember back to, like I said, 2020 years when we've looked at some of these things in week one. We're just it's just week one. Let's see what happens. And then they keeps becoming a thing. So it's trying to find that fine line between figuring out if it's something's an overreaction or, hey, no, this is something that they need to clean up. So we'll see. And yeah, hopefully it does get cleaned up.
I think just one last kind of general note that I had on the offense here was that it was really great to see Duvernay step up. Certainly, I don't play DFS. I know you guys do, but Duvernay would not have been my first option to say the most consistent weapon on the Ravens offense this week. But certainly, having 2 touchdowns, I think this game he definitely showed that he was the third receiving option behind Andrews and Bateman. Another guy who's had a great preseason who didn't really show too much today was Isaiah Likely. I think he had a few targets early in the game. Just wasn't able to make those. I think he had a pass where, just wasn't able to kind of scoop it. It was a low pass from Lamar. Didn't even be able to get that. He had another pass that was kind of broken up that just wasn't able to make a play. After that, really wasn't targeted much for the rest of the game. And I know, nationally, I think he's been, having a lot of, locally and nationally, I think having a lot of praise, and rightfully so, from the preseason as kind of being that third target. But this game, it was really Duvernay who really showed that he was kind of the third target for sure. So that's really exciting. I think there's a lot that he can kind of build off of for the coming weeks. I do think in general, just, if this is sort of a taste of, the next couple of weeks, what the Ravens offense is going to look like, I definitely think that more deep passing is probably on the menu. Because not just from Duvernay, but from Bateman and also from Robinson, all 3 of those guys can definitely stretch the field, and it looked like that Lamar wanted to try and find them as much as possible.
Oh, with that, I think we want to move on to talking about the defense. Again, like we said, this unit had an absolutely stellar game. kept the Jets out of the end zone for pretty much the entirety that the game was actually competitive. And, it had a pretty good pass rush. Again, we looked at that as the weakest unit of this defense coming into the season, albeit, sure, the Jets' offensive line was hurting, so you do need to take that into consideration. But some really early good signs there from guys like Justin Houston, Calais Campbell. Michael Pierce was also in the backfield quite a bit. We want to see that against a better unit, sure, before we get too excited about that. But I think we also have to acknowledge that unit performed better than expected in this game today.
Oh, for sure. Interior pass rush, I think. I'll just say right now, those, I think between Pierce, Madubuike, and Washington, they're my MVP for this week, hands down. Interior pass rush was just amazing. Really, and I think these stats don't even tell the full story. I think 2 sacks were reversed because of penalty on the back end. Mm-hmm. So, they were just absolutely dominant. You did mention Houston had a great game as well. I think he actually should have ended up with 2 sacks, but he also had one that was called back, or one that he wasn't able to get connected. I think Joe was able to, they called it an incompletion, I think, something like that. But Houston was dominating Noah Fant on the left side, particularly in the second quarter. He looked pretty good. But interior pass rush, they were just getting in Joe's face all along. And it's great to see because the players that you have and what McDonald's doing with generating pass rush, in that I think you really kind of had the pocket collapsing on all sides at the same time, right? So it wasn't like you had all the interior guys pushing and then the outside just sort of losing contain, right? It's just everything is sort of collapsing to the point where Joe has to be able to make that throw or he's going to get sacked. And I think that really worked well this week. It was just a great game plan, overall execution from the pass rush. But yeah, boy, it was. I think the interior guys, just played great. And it's just so crazy to me, just knowing the last year or so, having some of these same guys on the team. It seems like everybody is kind of taken a level up this year. Is great to see.
Yeah, Queen looked better. Madubuike, the interior pass rush. Houston looked better. I thought it looked really great. The defense had me excited. The defense was definitely pretty suffocating and rallying around the ball. Marcus Williams had a great pick, obviously. The wide receiver fell down, so he was uncontested there. But, just to be there, had a nice return on it. I thought they had swagger. They had confidence. And I am extremely excited about this group. This group definitely felt like, to me, showed the makings of what could be a dominant group. Whereas the offense, I didn't really see the makings of the dominant offense. I still believe it can come. I think it can all come together and all that stuff. But when I looked at the offense, I didn't come away thinking, oh yeah, there's definitely going to be a top 10 group this year. It's like, well, there's a little bit of question marks and they have things they have to clean up and whatnot. Whereas I watched the defense swarm and I was like, yeah, there'll be a top 10, maybe top 5, top 3, top whatever unit. I think there could be a really great unit.
That is interesting because I don't know. I wasn't able to take quite that much away from it. Again, I try not to look too far into week one. You look back at 2015, good gosh. That game against the corpse of Peyton Manning, the Ravens defense looked brilliant in that game. And then you look the next 3 weeks after that, everything just fell off. And that secondary was absolute Swiss cheese. And that's why I caveated what I said about the pass rush with yeah, they played great, but the competition, I don't know. It's just hard to gauge exactly how good it was. What can it really tell us about the rest of the season going forward? I think that's the kind of tough part about evaluating this game from the defensive perspective was the Jets. We talked about going into this game. Oh, they've got all these weapons that can give these guys issues. They've got Elijah Moore. They've got Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, and those guys all got plays, Michael Carter being the most successful. But at the same time, just the Jets were not able to get into any rhythm at all to give those guys a fair shake at anything. So it's like, I don't know. I'm just not really sure if we learned anything from the defense today beyond maybe, some scheme things that the Ravens might be doing under McDonald this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Kind of going back to the top with, what I said about Flacco, and that he's kind of showed the same thing we've been seeing the last couple of years of like, you get enough pressure in his face, you get enough hits on him, you get him off his spot, it just kind of disrupts everything about him. And, I can kind of see it from that angle. I think maybe this isn't new. I think this is kind of in line with what we've been hearing about out of camp. But I do think overall the defensive line group is looking like it's the strength of this team, particularly the depth, right? Because it wasn't just the starters that were having success. It was the guys that were rotating in. Actually, I don't know. I guess Matabuke would probably be considered a starter in this case. But Washington, obviously not, but he had a good bit of success too. Whoever's rotating in and out, we're having a good bit of success. I think, in terms of scheme, I do think we saw a little bit more from the linebackers. I know, some guys who, we talked about in the preseason, like Harrison, maybe still not kind of like Mike material, has some issues in coverage, but, I mean, he was a little bit more up on the line. I think he had a few tackles early. Playing more of that kind of Sam role, actually, maybe a little bit more on the outside, but putting him in a better position to kind of make plays. Queen as well, I thought had a strong game from like a pass rush perspective. He had a couple of hits on Flacco. I don't think he ended up with a sack, if I recall, but he had a few hits on Flacco from the pass rush side of things. So, I do think there were some elements of that. You even saw some safeties blitz. I think Hamilton was in on a play, and I think Marcus Williams also had a pressure up the middle at one point as well. So you saw some like elements of things that you can do there. I do think overall, just to kind of go more of a high level in sort of the defense, I think what this game kind of showed us is that interior defensive line and I think safety play, I think by far are the Ravens' strengths right now. I thought, for Hamilton, I think I wanted to maybe see a little bit more. I think he's a rookie. He's got to clean some things up. But I thought Marcus Williams and Chuck Clark had a great game, both of them. Obviously, Marcus with the interception early looked really good. I thought his tackling was really great. He always kind of seemed to be in position to be able to make plays. And it was even, kind of on a couple of broken plays too, right? For guys like Carter kind of running behind the defense and being able to get loose. It seemed like Marcus was always in a good position, like wrap up and then rally. He didn't let things try to get behind him. I really kind of liked that from him. And then Chuck Clark, again, I think had a pretty good game overall. Again, solid tackler. We know that he's been that for the Ravens for the last couple of years. And then that one play where he had the forced fumble later in the game. Great heads-up play from him, which impacted the game. He also had that play later, I think, on that fourth down play where he was kind of channeling his inner Troy Polamalu to try and jump over the line to tackle Flacco, which was kind of funny, but although maybe inconsequential. But yeah, as a whole, I think those guys played really well. I don't know. What did you guys see anything else, any particular plays or anything that kind of stood out to you?
I mainly just noticed how the defensive line, like you mentioned, was able to collapse around Flacco several times. I mean, I know we said that 2 of the sacks got taken away due to penalty, and there was 3 sacks on the day, but it felt like he was getting pressured and collapsed upon frequently, and that gave me a lot of warm fuzzies. The quickness of Queen to be able to rally and get to the edge and get the tackle on that one play. I just thought Queen in general looked better this game. Kind of saw a little bit more consistency out of his ability to either get after the quarterback or finish plays. I would say he was more consistently finishing plays that he had opportunities for rather than them slipping through his fingers or just not quite getting there. So that looked good. And I feel the same way as you, Chris, as far as Hamilton goes. I have his jersey. I'm ready to annoy him. I think I'm wearing an OA jersey right now. I think I was ready for him to have that big game like OA did, the first 2 weeks. And I just haven't quite, seen that. He had that one missed tackle. And the thing that's funny about him, whenever he misses a tackle, he's such a large human, so lanky, so long, that whenever he misses a tackle, you're like, man, you had so much wingspan to work with there. You didn't get it. But I still believe in the player. I still think he can, I think he'll still be very good. It just, like I said, I was ready to anoint him as the next, coming in, and it hasn't quite happened yet.
I will say in regards to Hamilton, I'm really glad that the Ravens did not trade Chuck Clark. Safety's a tough position to learn at the NFL level. Sometimes, it takes players longer, at some positions than others. It takes certain players, even at the same position, longer times to acclimate to the NFL than others. And, I still think Hamilton has a high ceiling. He doesn't look bad to me. It just looks to me like he's still adjusting in some portions to the NFL from what we've seen in preseason in week 1. And, we got to be patient. We saw what happened just recently with the Orioles. They called up Adley Rutschman. It took him about a month to look solid. And then, right now he's looking like, I don't think I'm using hyperbole to say he's looking like an all-star player right now.
Agreed. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with Hamilton. I think we'll have to be a little patient with him. And luckily, we've got 2 studs in Williams and Clark right now who, like we said, we're recording this Sunday night, so we've hardly had a chance to do much rewatch at all. And if you're not looking at all 22, you really can't analyze the secondary because the ball snaps and they're off the frame. So, I'm really excited to rewatch and see what the safeties were doing because you didn't see a lot of breakdowns from it, just watching the game casually, right? I can't really think of any blown coverages that I can remember. Part of it, of course, sure, was that the Jets really weren't challenging that terribly much, but Chuck Clark and Marcus Williams, though, were in on a lot of plays. Clark, I believe, forced a fumble in the first quarter. Thought he did. I'm not seeing
definitely
that on the
forced
box
a fumble eventually, but yes.
It was like the third or fourth quarter was when it was forced. Yeah.
Was it later? Okay. Yeah.
Later in the game.
But yeah, like you were saying, Chris, Marcus Williams made a lot of great plays. Interestingly enough, and I just checked this, career high in tackles today for Marcus Williams. Whether you want to, tally it by either solo or total, career high. Go figure. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I can say about the defense this this game, Chris, you were asking, were there any specific plays that stood out? And I'm racking my brain for it because here's the thing with the defense this game, they were just so freaking consistent. They were so consistent that, like, every drive they were making splash plays. Every drive they were quick to the ball, collapsing the pocket. They had no bad drives. So it's nothing really stood out because it was all the same. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's actually a good thing. They played from start to finish a complete game on the defense. And, I know I'm saying, oh, you can't tell that much because it was against an inferior opponent, but I do still think, you have to acknowledge that they went out and did their job and they executed the assignment perfectly. You can't help who you're playing, but you can help how you perform against them. And that's exactly what they did.
I'm looking forward to seeing how they do next week against Miami. I hope that the weather's better. I hope that they get the best shake of really challenging the defense downfield with the Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I just want to see how they handle that because I think although we are high on the Jets' offensive weapons and their long-term view, I think the game conditions in Week 1 and Flacco they weren't as imposing on us as I don't know if I would say hoped, but I just wanted a little bit more of a warm-up, so to speak, or more fire to the Ravens defense. So let's see how they go against Miami. But yeah, definitely there's some really good aspects there.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, Tyreek Hill alone will be more of a test for this defense than anyone they played today. You could argue Jalen Waddle would also be a handful, and people like to harp on Tua, but he's clean with the football. We saw that today against New England. So
he's kind of like Garoppolo, honestly. He's like a little bit better version of Garoppolo.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I agree with that. Yeah, so it'll be a little bit of a different game next week.
There's just a couple more players I guess I can kind of mention. As far as a really good game I thought this guy had. Brandon Stevens. I know the last couple of preseason games we've kind of been ragging on him a little bit, and he's been kind of picked on in coverage. I thought he had a pretty strong game this game. Was in some tight coverage, made a couple pass deflections. I thought overall looked pretty good. And he might have had a penalty at some point this game. But overall, I thought he had a really great game, something to really build off of. Totally made me forget any of the negative stuff that he had this preseason, which I think is a great thing. As far as not so good, I felt that Owe was really quiet this game. For a game we were talking so much about the pass rush, I didn't really think Owe had much, if at any impact this game, frankly. I think maybe the weather conditions had something to do with it. Obviously, speed, I think, is a lot more of his forte. You're kind of limited on that a little bit. But I'd certainly like to see him have a bounce-back game in Miami and subsequent weeks to have a little bit more of an impact.
I'll have to watch the film on that. I think I definitely saw him drop back a couple times, so I'm curious if they were using him more in coverage and more in the Sam role to see. That's one thing in my All 22 rewatch I'm going to pay attention to is see how they were using Owe, because I don't think they were rushing him. So I think that's why you didn't see him there. Also, you were right, Chris. Stevens got charged for the illegal contact that actually negated a 6-yard sack by Matabuke.
Right. Yeah. Well, I will say, back onto the Owe point, though, they were definitely rushing him at some points. I mean, obviously, yeah, he was in coverage on a few plays. I think there was one he was chasing Carter down the sideline. So I could see he might have been playing some Sam snaps there, but yeah, I felt like he was just kind of getting stonewalled a little bit, maybe not using his hands effectively enough to be able to get around guys. So, in the few pass rush snaps that I did see from him, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure, we saw, I guess, Means play a little bit of outside linebacker. I didn't really see too much from him, so it's again back to the who are we going to play at outside linebacker discussion point. We only have so many people, so I kind of understand that we can't get a massive production out of him every week. You have to kind of regulate snaps somehow. And again, the defense played really well overall anyway, so it's not a huge deal, but it is something that I'm looking forward to for the weeks to come, see more out of Owe.
I was encouraged by what I saw out of Stevens, and I do think that was important, particularly with the Fuller injury at the end of the game. So he might be getting more snaps. And it was good to see a little bit of Armour Davis. I'll have to watch the film a little closer to see how he played, but I saw number 5 out there, and I was like, oh, look, there he is. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, there's a couple plays that Stevens made that were very surprised. I heard the radio broadcast when he deflected that pass and broke it up against Elijah Moore, was enamored by what he did. So
that was a really good play.
It was a great play. Yeah, it was a great play. Don't get me wrong. It was just I heard that the radio was pretty fun for that one. So yeah, very cool. And hopefully, he has so many physical gifts. We were talking all off season how he kind of got buried by all the draft picks and everything that was going on. We're like, what's his role? If he can really step up and be a solid third corner, or maybe even number 2 if Peters isn't fully online, that will be huge for this team. I guess we'll wrap it up by talking about our MVPs. I think, Chris, you should go ahead. You already kind of pre-declared.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I have a bunch. I would feel bad if I named them all because you guys need to go. So I'll pick top one. No, I'll pick my top one for this week. I'll pick Justin Matabuke. I'll be honest, the last couple of years, I know I've been a little bit critical of him and just have wanted to see a lot more from him. Even though he'd been receiving a lot of praise from guys like Calais Campbell as to his improved growth year over year, I thought this game he was fantastic, very effective, both in the run game and in pass rush. Just a great overall game from him.
Yeah, I was really happy to see that from Linderbaum. But wait. I was really happy to see that from Matabuke. That was a really, really great game from him. Linderbaum, I think, from what I've seen, had a good game too. We didn't talk about him, but I'm really excited to see what the guys, who really delve into the offensive line have to say about him. He seemed to really fight out there. But I will be going offense for my MVP. And did this guy necessarily have the best game of the wide receivers outside of Bateman? Maybe not, but he was the one who got the red zone opportunities and he came away with them. Was 2 for 2. Devin Duvernay, we've talked about how receiving options outside of Bateman and Andrews are going to be huge. A huge area for these guys to step up, and Duvernay was able to do it this week. We'll see if that continues or someone else will be there next week, but I'll give it to Duvernay this week for the MVP.
I was glad to see how Duvernay made himself available in those extended plays, and provided himself an outlet for Lamar. And of course, scoring the touchdowns is just gravy on top of that. But I think the execution there was really great. For mine, I'm gonna go with Houston. I honestly think that he was just a force. He kept kind of collapsing the pocket, and I am appreciative of that. My other kind of joke one is honestly Lamar Jackson. He bailed us out a couple times on 3rd and long, either with his legs or just by, usually with his legs in some capacity, either scrambling to find the time to find the wide receiver or by going and pick up the yards himself. And I just think he proved again that he's that dynamic playmaker. I kind of was really happy just to see him playing again. It had been months with the injury and no preseason games that I was just, when I was watching him play, I was like, oh man, there he is. That's our guy, and that was just nice. So gave Lamar a shout out there. He's still that dude. Well, thanks so much, guys, for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed week 1 as much as we did. We'll be back later this week with the preview of the Miami game, and then, of course, a recap. We'll both be there. Me and Chris, at least, will be there, and it'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to the first home game of the year. If you're going to be there, too, give us a shout-out, and maybe we can hang out for a little bit before the game. You can find us at OneWinningPod on Twitter, or email us onewinningpod@gmail.com if you want to get in touch. We'll talk to you soon. Go Ravens.